Order. Honorable members, I understand the Honorable Minister responsible for finance has got a paper to table. Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good afternoon, honorable members. Mr. Speaker, I have the honor this afternoon to present the financial statements, tables and estimates of the Consolidated and Development Funds revenues 2023-2024.
Let the paper be tabled. Clerk.
Presentation of a government bill.
My voice is voluminous enough. Honorable members, I am reliably informed that the Honorable Minister responsible for finance has a bill to present. Honorable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I have the honor to present the Appropriation 2023-2024 Bill 2023, Bill number 4 of 2023.
Let the bill be read the first time. Clerk.
Appropriation 2023-2024 Bill 2023, Bill number 4 of 2023. First reading.
One for second reading, Honorable Minister.
Forthwith, Mr. Speaker.
Forthwith. Clerk.
Notice of motions and orders of the day. Appropriation 2023-2024 Bill 2023, Bill number 4 of 2023, second reading.
Order. The question is that the Appropriation 2023-2024 Bill 2023, Bill number 4 of 2023, be read a second time. Honorable Minister, please present your budget. But before you read, before the Honorable Minister present her budget, re tsogarna le moyeng motlotege rra rona tautona raitso tautona wa Switzerland. So ke moyeng wa ga rra rona motlotege raitso tautona. E tla re somewhere along the line pele ga re tsana go gongwe ke golo le rra rona le batlotege matona a puso bangwe batlotege matona a puso go a go tsaya moyeng wa ga rra rona. Honorable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I have the honor this afternoon to present to the National Assembly the budget proposals for the 2023-2024 financial year. Mr. Speaker, the 2023 budget speech marks the first year of the two-year Transitional National Development Plan, TNDP, and is a critical point in our transformation journey. The introduction of the second TNDP is of strategic significance and has affirmed our democratic credentials as a country, as it has made it possible to align our national development planning process to the electoral cycle. This will also allow a newly elected administration to set its development agenda on the basis of the promises it has made to the people in its electoral manifesto. This means that NDP 12 has been deferred to the financial year 2025-2026. Mr. Speaker, the 2023-2024 budget allocations are in line with agreed policies and programs, as well as Vision 2036 and the Reset and Reclaim agenda priorities. It is the relentless pursuit of these priorities that will deliver broad-based transformation, create new wealth prospects, and expand horizons of economic opportunities for all Botswana through a growth model that leaves no one behind. It is important to recall, however, Mr. Speaker, that transformation is a multi-year journey and cannot be achieved in one budget cycle. Each year's budget and the government's policy and legislative program marks a step-by-step contribution to achieving that transformation. Mr. Speaker, consistent with our aspiration and determination to become a high-income country by 2036, I would like to emphasize the need to direct our resources to areas that will significantly change the lives of Botswana and create new sustainable economic opportunities. Government will continue to invest in programs geared at sustaining livelihoods, promoting local economic development, enhancing human capital, as well as pursuing environmentally sustainable investments by adopting a green transition model of development. Mr. Speaker, we have already made significant progress in building the foundation for continued economic recovery and future resilience. Botswana emerged with one of the fastest recoveries from the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, with an impressive GDP growth rate of 11.8% recorded in 2021, the highest in sub-Saharan Africa. Our recovery has continued with strong GDP growth of 6.5% year-on-year over the first 3 quarters of 2022. For the full year of 2022, it is estimated that economic growth reached 6.7%. On this basis, once again, Botswana will be among the fastest growing economies in sub-Saharan Africa in the year 2022. Mr. Speaker, this growth has translated into tangible results. We saw a small decline in unemployment, falling from the post-COVID peak of 26% in 2021 to 25.5% in the fourth quarter of 2022. In 2021-2022 financial year, we achieved a broadly balanced budget, in contrast to the substantial deficit that was anticipated. The balance of savings in the government investment account also showed a steady improvement. COVID-19 has become a manageable health issue and is no longer posing the burden on the health system or costing lives to the extent that it was a year ago. Other notable milestones include enhanced initiatives to support the empowerment of Botswana economically. For instance, Mr. Speaker, Botswana has been actively developing the capacity of citizen-owned firms in its supply chain. Similarly, Botswana Oil Limited has strengthened its role of developing citizen-owned firms in the oil supply value chain. Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding these achievements, as we enter the new financial year, the external environment is more challenging than it was a year ago. Mr. Speaker, at that point, the world was emerging from the COVID-19 pandemic, with the benefits of the vaccine rollout being experienced globally. Growth was recovering, and in many countries, unemployment was beginning to fall. Over the past year, however, Mr. Speaker, this growth momentum has slowed, due largely to the Russia-Ukraine conflict and its impact on the availability of critical commodities, inflation, and interest rates. Global growth prospects for 2023 are now subdued, with recession expected in some major countries. And while most countries have contained COVID-19, the rapid resurgence of the virus in China poses risks of new variants emerging that could be transmitted internationally. Mr. Speaker, there are also domestic challenges which relate mainly to the slow speed of implementation of reforms and initiatives, as well as long-standing issues relating to the quality of projects. Corruption is also increasingly a concern, despite our ranking having improved. Our ratings have improved from a score of 5.5% in the Corruption Perception Index, being number 45 of 180 countries in 2021, which was a slight decline compared to the year before. We have since moved to a score of 6.0% in 2022, being number 35 out of 180 countries internationally, indicating our substantial efforts in fighting corruption in Botswana. Mr. Speaker, government continues to support all law enforcement agencies in the country to curb this gap, which may be one of the causes of poor project implementation, as well as financial losses to government and society in general. On the economic front, we have made insufficient progress in the critical task of diversifying exports, while unemployment remains relatively high. Mr. Speaker, the 2023-2024 budget, therefore, has to balance our objective of spurring economic activity and achieving higher growth, while at the same time managing this and other domestic and international challenges. I will briefly highlight some of the key measures included in this budget that will help us to achieve these objectives. Mr. Speaker, in the 2023-2024 financial year, we will significantly increase the development budget as we strive to fill infrastructure gaps and implement projects that are necessary to unlock constraints to economic growth. The budget will continue to address expenditure inefficiencies and weaknesses in revenue collection by strengthening tax audit capabilities and leveraging on the public-private partnership, or PPP, and development manager model approaches. Overall development expenditure will be increased by 27.88% in the 2023-2024 financial year, compared to the budget for the current year. This significant increase in the development budget may pose another risk of corrupt activities in its execution. Government will therefore continue to put in place risk mitigating measures and also ensure that the law is enforced effectively. I also call upon the public to be vigilant and assist in safeguarding our national resources. Mr. Speaker, government's decision to allocate the largest share of the development budget to the implementation of infrastructure projects is influenced by the recognition that infrastructure development is a critical enabler for enhanced productivity and sustainable economic growth. This will also promote the active participation of the private sector, women, youth, and citizens more generally, all in pursuit of building resilience, strengthening inclusiveness, and increasing growth. Mr. Speaker, allow me to reiterate that since Botswana is strategically positioned in Southern Africa, this presents a great opportunity for us to play a significant role in the development of regional infrastructure projects, as we did with the Kazungula Bridge. It is therefore crucial for all those involved in the delivery of infrastructure projects to ensure that this is done efficiently and effectively. Mr. Speaker, provision of electricity remains integral to imperatives of inclusive and sustained economic growth. As such, the provision and strengthening of electricity network for rural villages will be accelerated. In this regard, it is worth noting that the current power deficit in the region has affected, for the most part, villages along the border, which rely on cross-border connectivity. And as I stated in the 2022 budget speech, a number of energy projects have therefore been initiated to meet the growing energy demand through alternative energy generating methods, such as solar photovoltaic, coal-bed methane gas power, and wind power. The project to connect the Borolong and Khatle River villages, which are currently supplied from the Republic of South Africa, commenced this financial year, and is expected that it will be completed by March 2024. Mr. Speaker, as this Honorable House may recall, the Transfer Duty Amendment Act of 2019 introduced payment of transfer duty on tribal land. On the other hand, the reenacted Tribal Land Act 2018 and the Disregistry Amendment Act of 2017 requires that all tribal land grants be registered with the Disregistry. The effect of these reforms is that an allocation made by the land board is now a transfer chargeable to duty, and thus a valuation certificate is required. This creates a bottleneck in the access to land by both Botswana and businesses. I therefore wish to confirm that government has decided to revise the Transfer Duty Act as a matter of urgency to address these challenges. Mr. Speaker, I intend to present this bill to Parliament during the current session. Mr. Speaker, Botswana, as well as most countries in the world, has experienced a sharp rise in the cost of living due to high global inflation. To mitigate this, government temporarily reduced the rate of value-added tax VAT from 14% to 12%, which has since been extended to the end of this financial year. Looking ahead, with a view to providing targeted support to sustain livelihoods, the ministry is currently reviewing the list of items that are zero-rated or exempted for VAT purposes. The list will be extended to include, among others, infant formula, baby diapers, sanitary products, and private medical services. Some items that are currently in the list but are no longer justifiable to maintain may be removed, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, government has also introduced a new wealth creation program, which consolidates some of the existing economic empowerment loan and grant programs. The wealth creation program will continue implementation of micro-enterprise projects in agriculture, housing, social protection, women empowerment, and education sectors to create employment and improve livelihoods. It encompasses poverty eradication with a view to enable the sustainability and or viability of the micro projects for long-run purposes. A budget of 85 million pula is therefore proposed for the wealth creation program under the development budget. In addition, the Youth Development Fund will continue to be funded at 104 million pula under the recurrent budget. Mr. Speaker, to further support livelihoods, the allowances paid under various social welfare programs have been reviewed. The old age pension, destitute allowance, disability allowance, World War II veterans allowance, as well as Ipelegen rate will be increased effective April 2023. Mr. Speaker, I now move on to review of National Development Plan 11.
May we have order, please? May we have order, please? May we have order, please? Continue on, Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to provide a brief review of NDP 11, which comes to an end on the 31st of March 2023. Mr. Speaker, it is important to recognize that NDP 11 is the first of the 3 NDPs that will ensure the successful implementation of the National Vision 2036. The plan has therefore been critical in setting the strategic foundation of transforming Botswana from an upper middle income country to a high income country by 2036. As you are aware, the midterm review of NDP 11 confirmed that the performance of the first half of the plan was better than the second half. Mr. Speaker, the review of the plan underscored the urgent need to transform the economy and promote faster growth in order to generate job-creating opportunities. At this point, Mr. Speaker, allow me to highlight some of the major achievements made during this plan period, that is NDP 11. Mr. Speaker, a number of major water supply projects have been completed. These include Mahalape Phalape Water Treatment Plant, Northeastern Tutume Sub-District Water Supply Scheme, and Lobatse Mogojogojo Water Supply Scheme. All these projects have improved water supply in and around those areas. In addition, Kazungula and Okavango River Omohembo bridges are some of the major projects which were completed during NDP 11. These 2 iconic bridges have significantly changed the lives of the people in these areas by improving transportation of goods, easing the movement of people, and delivery of government projects, which were affected by delays and transport by ferry. Mr. Speaker, other notable achievements include construction of 3 road interchanges in Gaborone aimed at improving traffic flow, which are expected to be completed by the end of this financial year. Commencement of Botswana energy water security and efficiency projects to improve availability of water supply and waste management. Connection of 665 government facilities, such as schools, Tikotla, and health facilities through the village connectivity program, whose intended purpose is to improve access to internet. Land allocation of 41,115 plots by December 2022 to facilitate both social and economic development. Moreover, government successfully completed the 2022 population and housing census, which is expected to guide planning and policy formulation. Further, the recently upgraded 11 subordinate district councils to fully fledged district councils will bring the much needed services closer to the people. The revamped Ipelegem program, which encompasses a skills development component and the high COVID-19 vaccination rate of 77.4%, are also some of the significant highlights of NDP 11 worth noting. Mr. Speaker, the removal of Botswana by the Financial Action Task Force, FATF for short, from the list of countries with strategic deficiencies in their anti-money laundering, counter-financing of terrorism, and counter-proliferation financing regimes, commonly referred to as the grey list, was also a major accomplishment, especially as it led to the delisting of Botswana from the European Union's list of high-risk countries. This involved addressing the specific shortcomings identified by the Eastern and Southern Africa Anti-Money Laundering Group and FATF, as well as strengthening our legal and institutional framework to avoid a recurrence of potential problems in future. The outcome shows that Botswana's laws, policies, and institutions are to a large extent compliant with international standards relating to anti-money laundering and countering the financing of terrorism. We will ensure, Mr. Speaker, that this compliance is enhanced and sustained. Mr. Speaker, in addition, Parliament has passed a number of laws whose effective implementation will improve the lives of an ordinary Botswana. These include amendment of the Value Added Tax Act, which has cushioned households from the high cost of living caused by inflationary pressures and other economic shocks. The Public Procurement Act and Economic Inclusion Act are expected also, Mr. Speaker, to increase participation of citizens in the economy and encourage the use of locally produced materials to promote local economic activities. This should translate into improved living standards and create employment opportunities for all Botswana. Further, the Retirement Funds Act will enhance the functioning of the pension system by strengthening corporate governance, supervision, and allowing deferred pensioners access to their pension funds, and thus providing relief to Botswana during times of financial distress. Furthermore, the Income Tax Superannuation Fund regulations of 2022 have also increased withdrawals from pension funds from a maximum of 1/3 to a maximum of 50% at retirement. Moreover, the Tribal Land and Deeds Registry Acts will enhance access to land, amongst others. Additionally, the Bank of Botswana Act and the Credit Information and Movable Property Acts will improve the efficiency and stability of the financial sector, as well as access to finance. Mr. Speaker, there was underperformance of GDP growth over the planned period as a whole, due in part to the COVID-19-induced recession in 2020 and impact of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Mr. Speaker, GDP and per capita incomes fell short of projections during the planned period. NDP 11 projected an average GDP growth rate of 4.2% over the 5 years from 2017 to 2021. However, the actual growth rate averaged only 2.7% a year over this period. This adds to the challenge of achieving a higher growth rate of 5.7% during the Transitional National Development Plan and NDP 12 in order to stay on track towards achieving high income status by 2036 and to reduce unemployment and eradicate abject poverty. Mr. Speaker, the unemployment rate has regrettably risen during NDP 11, from 17.5% of the labor force in 2015 to 22.2% in 2019, and further to 26% in 2021. The increase is partly attributable to the impact of COVID-19, but even before then, unemployment had been rising. I am pleased to note, however, that according to the preliminary data released by Statistics Botswana in January 2023, unemployment declined slightly to 25.4% in the fourth quarter of 2022. While this is a small change, it is encouraging that the unemployment rate is moving in the right direction. Mr. Speaker, following the lessons learned from NDP 11, government will continue to ensure macroeconomic stability and fiscal sustainability in order to restore financial buffers, which have declined since 2009 global financial crisis. Furthermore, government will strengthen measures to manage public sector efficiency in order to ensure quality delivery of public services. These measures will include cost-saving measures, rationalization of services, as well as improved monitoring and evaluation, amongst others. Mr. Speaker, I now move on to advancing national priorities and strategic objectives for 2023-2024. Mr. Speaker, drawing on the national priorities identified in the Transitional National Development Plan, the 2023-2024 budget is guided by 6 national priorities, namely digital transformation, business environment reform, infrastructure development, value chain development, sustaining livelihoods, and climate change. These priorities, Mr. Speaker, will require human capital development, which is a cross-cutting priority. In this regard, the main focus will be on skills development and provision of quality education to address gaps in human capital and provision of resources to support the education system. In this context, a significant amount of this year's budget, at 17.5 billion pula, is proposed for initiatives, programs, and projects related to human capital development from both the development and recurrent budgets. Digital transformation. Mr. Speaker, Botswana's goal of achieving a high-income country status by 2036 rests primarily on the strength of its digital ecosystem, specifically on access to affordable information and telecommunications technology infrastructure. Concerted efforts continue to be made towards digital transition by accelerating digital connectivity nationwide to close the connectivity gap. Also moving government services online, leveraging smart technologies to address food security, and transforming the education sector. Other digital transformation initiatives include full migration from analog transmission to digital terrestrial television, ensuring that the country benefits from the digital dividend high-definition broadcast and accessing more broadcast channels, as well as implementation of a digital competency framework aimed at building the digital literacy of the general public and the public service. Further to this, the Village Connectivity Project Phases 2 and 3, targeting 61 villages and 212 public facilities, will commence in March 2023, while preparations and planning for Phase 4, targeting more than 301 villages, will commence in the 2023-2024 financial year. To this end, a development budget of 2.620 billion pula is proposed for projects under this priority area. I now move on to business environment reforms, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, a conducive business climate is a prerequisite to achieving inclusive economic diversification, sustainable growth, and employment creation. Government regulations will continue to play a decisive role in creating an enabling environment for ease of doing business. In order to accelerate implementation of these reforms, a development budget of 420,900,000 pula is proposed for projects under this priority area. Mr. Speaker, some of the business environment enabling reforms by government include the passing of the Credit Information and Movable Property Acts by Parliament to improve access to credit by micro, small and medium enterprises, approval of the Public Procurement Act to promote citizen participation in the procurement process and to support locally manufactured goods, and the anticipated merger between the Local Enterprise Authority and Citizen Entrepreneurial Development Agency, so that the merged entity can provide integrated financial and non-financial support to micro, small, and medium enterprises. Mr. Speaker, one of the important reforms under Special Economic Zones, SEZs, relates to corporate income tax concessions. To this end, SEZ licensed companies can apply for tax relief certificates, giving them a 5% corporate tax rate for 10 years and 10% thereafter. Another important reform is the Transfer Duty Amendment Act of 2022 that exempts SEZ license holders from paying transfer duty when acquiring immovable property for purposes of operating business within a special economic zone. Mr. Speaker, government has prioritized the e-government initiative, which will receive support from, among others, the European Union under the Job Creation and Investment Climate Program. Some of the areas earmarked to benefit from the program include the Botswana One-Stop Service Center in Gaborone, which serves to fast-track turnaround time on investor applications, the development of the National Single Window, the judiciary, e-government, and promulgation of a new investment law, just to mention but a few, Mr. Speaker. I now move on to value chain development. Mr. Speaker, government remains committed to creating a conducive environment for the private sector to explore value chain opportunities in strategic sectors such as tourism, minerals, energy, manufacturing, and agriculture. In light of this, a development budget of 540,890,000 pula is proposed for this priority area. Mr. Speaker, Parliament approved Botswana's minerals policy in February 2022. Amongst the objectives of the new policy are to enhance the domestic economic benefit from minerals development through beneficiation and local value addition activities. Consequently, government is in the process of reviewing the key mining legislation, which is the Mines and Minerals Act, which deals with granting of licenses for mineral prospecting and exploration, as well as for mining operations. The proposed amendments will include provisions for local beneficiation of minerals and meeting local needs for mining products. Several mining, cutting, and polishing companies are currently considering beneficiation and value addition in their development plans, leveraging on advanced technology and emerging market opportunities. Allow me, Mr. Speaker, to single out new innovative technologies aimed at improving human safety and efficiency by mining companies operating in Botswana. Mr. Speaker, I'm informed that unmanned specialist mining equipment has been introduced in underground mining operations to extract mineral resources while minimizing underground environment human exposure, which is key to safety. To further advance these initiatives, a training facility with state-of-the-art simulators has been commissioned in Maung to assist in the skills transfer for local citizen participation in the mining and associated industries. In addition, the favorable market opportunities presented by the African Continental Free Trade Area, the Southern African Development Community, SADC, and the Southern African Customs Union, SACU, free trade agreements have the potential to develop and to grow the Botswana economy into an export-led and structurally transformed one through exploitation of value chains in the region and the continent at large. I now move on to infrastructure development. Mr. Speaker, government will continue to devote more resources to infrastructure development to support sustainable growth and improve livelihoods. To this end, a development budget of 12,730 million pula is proposed for implementation of infrastructure development projects. Mr. Speaker, in order to address water supply and sanitation challenges across the country, major projects on water and sanitation will continue to be implemented in the 2023-2024 financial year. These include, among others, rehabilitation of water networks, especially in areas prone to frequent breakdowns, such as Kanye and Molepolole. Mr. Speaker, to enable the country to be a net exporter of electricity, implementation of projects under the Integrated Resource Plan will continue to be fast-tracked to ensure security of electricity supply. The Integrated Resource Plan encompasses mainly green technology projects geared to addressing, amongst others, the issue of climate change while reducing the country's high electricity import bill. The current target is to raise the contribution of renewable energy in total power generation from 1% to 30% by the year 2030. Furthermore, government approved the development manager model of project delivery in December 2022, which will be used to implement, among others, road projects, office buildings and staff houses, hospital facilities, schools, stormwater drainage, development of the leather industry park, as well as the Kasane Kazungula redevelopment projects. Mr. Speaker, these are catered for at a total cost of 15,240 million pula over 2 years. Sustaining livelihoods. Mr. Speaker, government recognizes the need to promote sustainable livelihoods and build resilience by ensuring all members of society have the opportunity to participate in mainstream economic activities, while also prioritizing the needs of vulnerable groups, especially in the rural communities. In order to sustain livelihoods, a development budget of 2,350 million pula is proposed for projects and programs under this priority area. Mr. Speaker, the 2021 Pilot National Multidimensional Poverty Index results reveal that 20.8% of the population are poor. This index serves to measure poverty across a range of living standards indicators rather than just income. The results also reflected that poverty incidence is higher in rural areas. Hence, Mr. Speaker, Botswana will need to continue to devote sizable resources to social protection to support the most vulnerable in our society. In this context, 5,350 million pula from both the development and recurrent budgets has been allocated for social protection programs across the economy. Mr. Speaker, various initiatives are underway to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the social welfare system to make it more sustainable. The single social registry, which will include all beneficiaries of social welfare schemes, has been rolled out to all districts and will be operational with effect from April 2023. To improve targeting of social welfare benefits on the most needy individuals and households, a harmonized eligibility system will be developed across all social welfare programs. Mr. Speaker, the revamped Ipelegam program has been extended to other sectors such as agriculture, tourism, and natural resource management. Meanwhile, government is reviewing the Botswana National Homegrown School Feeding Program across all levels of basic education. This is in order to fully implement the homegrown feeding program for all educational levels, and at the same time, sourcing from local farmers and suppliers in order to enhance market opportunities. Currently, 5,263 farmers are supplying eggs, vegetables, and fruits across all districts in Botswana. Mr. Speaker, as mentioned earlier, In order to reduce the impact of the higher cost of living on vulnerable households, we introduced concessions in the form of a temporary reduction in VAT by 2 percentage points until the end of this financial year. In addition, Mr. Speaker, the zero rating of liquefied petroleum gas and cooking oil for 6 months was undertaken to assist households to absorb the adverse effects of high global prices. I now move on to climate change. Mr. Speaker, government remains committed to supporting the necessary mitigation and adaptation activities in order to reduce the country's vulnerability to climate change and protecting the livelihoods of the population. Mr. Speaker, the National Climate Change Policy commits to the integration of climate change considerations into infrastructure planning, designing, and development processes. To this end, guidelines for incorporating climate change issues into environmental impact assessments will be finalized during the 2023-2024 financial year. Additionally, the International Monetary Fund is providing technical support to Botswana through a climate public investment management assessment. The recommendations from this exercise, which are being reviewed by government, are focused on ensuring that climate change considerations are embedded into sectoral infrastructure development plans.
Silence, please. Please.
Mr. Speaker, government will continue to mobilize climate financing through green bonds, participating in carbon credit markets, as well as accessing the Green Climate Fund. To this end, Botswana's portfolio of projects approved through the Green Climate Fund stands at 7, amounting to $81 million, which cover both adaptation and mitigation objectives. In addition, the European Union is supporting Botswana's green transformation initiatives aimed at, amongst others, improving the country's energy mix and reducing Botswana's vulnerability to climate change at an amount of €3 million. In addition to these donor funds, a development budget of 1,360 million pula is proposed under this priority area. Mr. Speaker, I now wish to give the context for the 2023-2024 financial year, starting with macroeconomic outlook and fiscal developments. Mr. Speaker, I wish to give the context for the 2023-2024 budget. The current global operating environment remains challenging, largely due to the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, which has disrupted supply chains throughout the year. Against this backdrop, the January 2023 World Economic Outlook update from the International Monetary Fund estimates global growth to slow down to 3.4% in 2022 from 6.2% in 2021, before decelerating further to 2.9% in 2023. These developments are expected to have significant spillovers to other economies, including the sub-Saharan African region, where growth is expected to drop from 4.7% in 2021 to 3.8% in both 2022 and 2023. Growth in SADC is expected on average to slow down from 4.5% in 2021 to 3% and 2.8% in 2022 and 2023, respectively. Mr. Speaker, the Botswana economy showed strong resilience as the country emerged with one of the fastest recoveries from the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. The economy grew by 11.8% in 2021, the fastest rate in sub-Saharan Africa. It got off to a strong start in 2022 as economic growth averaged 6.5% year-on-year during the first 3 quarters of the year. This growth is mainly due to better than expected performance of both the mining and non-mining sectors, particularly diamond trading, manufacturing, water and electricity, ICT, wholesale and retail, as well as public administration. The domestic economy is estimated to grow by 6.7% in 2022, Going forward, growth is projected at 4% and 5.1% in 2023 and 2024, respectively. This growth is expected to be broad-based across most non-mining sectors and the diamond industry. The non-diamond sector is estimated to grow on average by 5% over the 2 years and is expected to generate about 35,000 new jobs across both the formal and informal sectors during this period. Mr. Speaker, with regard to inflation, domestic prices remain skewed to the upside as prices of basic commodities and manufactured goods escalated during the year. Annual inflation had risen to 14.6% by August 2022, which was the highest rate since November 2008. In response to the high inflationary pressures, the Bank of Botswana increased the monetary policy rate from 1.65% in April 2022 to 2.65% in August 2022 and has maintained it to date. So far, inflation has moderated to 12.4% in December 2022, owing in part to the combined effect of the temporary reduction in VAT rate and zero rating of some food commodities, as well as a reduction in global and domestic fuel prices. Despite the increase in interest rates, the overall financial and credit conditions remain supportive of economic activity and are consistent with bringing inflation to within the objective range of 3 to 6% in the medium term. With respect to the overall balance of payments, a surplus of 5.2 billion pula was recorded in the first half of 2022, a significant improvement from a deficit of 4.2 billion pula during the same period in 2021. The surplus in 2022 was mainly a result of net cash inflows from diamond exports and Sakura receipts. This surplus translated into an increase in foreign exchange reserves, which stood at 59.6 billion pula as at November 2022. However, at these levels, the reserves remain low by historical standards and were only sufficient to cover 10 months of import cover of non-diamond goods and services. This compares with 57.6 billion pula of foreign exchange reserves 12 months earlier. Mr. Speaker, despite positive performance in 2022, looking ahead, macro-fiscal risks are elevated. Among these are risks to GDP growth, which stem from the likelihood of slowing growth and possible recession in advanced countries. This may adversely affect diamond sales in 2023, with implications for export earnings and government revenues. This is being compounded by rising COVID-19 infections in China, which has led to severe restrictions on retail activity and slow GDP growth. Mr. Speaker, global inflation risks arise from prolonged geopolitical tensions, causing further disruption of supply chains and potential increases in international commodity prices. There are also risks arising from wage price spirals in countries with tight labor markets. Furthermore, the sharp appreciation of the US dollar, in which most commodities are priced, may contribute to currency depreciations and exert an upward pressure on inflation in many countries. Domestically, these potential increases in imported inflation could be compounded by a rise in administered prices and levies and/or taxes beyond current forecasts. These inflation risks may increase prices that are indexed or closely linked to inflation, such as compensation of employees, procurement of goods and services, as well as inputs for some infrastructure projects. Mr. Speaker, our current revenue structure, which to some extent is outside the control of government, is susceptible to external shocks and subject to a high degree of volatility and uncertainty. This revenue risk, combined with rising expenditure commitments, could compromise fiscal consolidation and the long-term objective of restoring fiscal sustainability, resulting in elevated debt risks. Other downside risks to our macro-fiscal profile may come from subdued domestic demand, as disposable incomes get eroded by the current inflationary environment and the recent interest rate hikes. Furthermore, the outbreaks of foot and mouth disease in the region and the Southeast District pose risks to the agriculture sector's output, with potential spillovers to related sectors such as leather and leather products and exports of beef and live cattle. All of these developments could hinder growth by lowering current prospects and limiting the speed at which the economy could recover to its long-term potential, with implication on our fiscal balances. Mr. Speaker, I now move on to our fiscal strategy, given all this. Mr. Speaker, the current global and domestic operating landscape presents fiscal policy challenges and requires us to reorient our fiscal strategy to achieve an appropriate balance between revenues, expenditure, and debt accumulation to ensure that debt servicing costs are sustainable. In this regard, our fiscal strategy in the 2023-2024 budget and beyond will continue to be strengthened to achieve our objectives of running surpluses and rebuilding financial buffers. For medium to long-term sustainability, we will explore the possibility of enacting into law the revenue fiscal rule highlighted in NDP 11 in order to restore sustainability. In the immediate term, we will focus on strengthening fiscal prudence and discipline, enhancing revenue mobilization, improving the efficiency of public spending, restoring government's net financial assets and debt sustainability, as well as improving budget transparency and participation. Fiscal prudence and discipline. Mr. Speaker, fiscal policy shifts as depicted by changes in expenditure, revenue, and debt dynamics are part of the country's transformation. In light of this, we will continue to implement prudent fiscal policy in line with international best practice as part of a broader macroeconomic management framework. In this regard, government remains committed to implementing its fiscal consolidation program, focused on reducing the public sector wage bill, grants and subventions, and introducing widespread state-owned enterprise reforms. These efforts are aimed at reducing government's economic footprint and increasing the space for the private sector. As part of cost containment measures, government will continue to review subventions and grants to state-owned enterprises and local authorities with a view to reducing the allocations to the extent that is possible. Mr. Speaker, as pronounced last year, the Ministry of Finance undertook a special audit of the tertiary education financing activities over a 10-year period, mainly the tuition fees budget. The work started in June and officially ended in November 2022, and its report is being internally reviewed by the ministry and key stakeholders. It is expected that firm decisions will emerge out of the findings and corrective action initiated by the end of the financial year. To ensure accountability, transparency, efficiency, and most importantly, value for money, the ministry will continue to conduct more audits for various expenditure items, with the next targeting the transport, agriculture, and health sectors to clamp down on inefficiencies, irregularities, and cases of mismanagement. Strengthening revenue mobilization. Mr. Speaker, the need to diversify and expand the fiscal revenue base in the face of long-term structural declines in mineral and SACCO revenues remains paramount. In this regard, the ministry, through the Botswana Unified Revenue Service, continues to put in place measures to improve tax revenue collection. In the 2023-2024 financial year, Botswana Unified Revenue Service will complete a number of initiatives, including introduction of electronic billing or invoicing platforms to improve VAT compliance, introduction of a digital marking and tracking solution for excisable goods to ensure that legitimate duties and taxes are paid on imported and manufactured products, enhanced capacity in the use of non-intrusive equipment or scanners to curb cases of non-compliance by importers at ports of entry, implementation of the debt recovery strategy, and strengthening of the tax audit function and the capacity of the large taxpayers unit. All these efforts are geared towards improving taxpayer compliance and border security, thereby reducing revenue leakages and enhancing collection, as well as strengthening trade facilitation. Other areas that we will focus on in the next financial year include enhancing the revenue-raising capacity of councils and land boards. Mr. Speaker, improving the efficiency of public spending. Mr. Speaker, during November 2022, the ministry, supported by the International Monetary Fund, carried out a second public investment management assessment. The preliminary results demonstrate that although Botswana has performed well in the area of institutional framework, this does not translate to performance on the ground, in part because agreed institutional processes are not fully adhered to in practice. For instance, we have a high-quality planning officer's manual detailing how public investment projects should be evaluated and prioritized, but in practice, the procedures specified in this manual are not used effectively. The results conclude that there's a gap of 31% between Botswana's public investment efficiency and that of the most efficient country with a comparable level of public capital stock. Mr. Speaker, the results means that Botswana is comparable to the average for emerging market economies such as China, Mexico, India, Saudi Arabia, and Brazil. While the methodology is not exactly the same, the latest review results are more favorable than the efficiency gap of 37% revealed by the previous assessment conducted in 2017. Mr. Speaker, in order to narrow the identified efficiency gap, we will ensure that public finance management reforms are enforced, including through issuance of statutory instruments to improve implementation. Further, a number of reforms are being implemented to address the challenges of poor project implementation. And these include enhancement of the development project monitoring system, which is expected to be completed by December of this year, Mr. Speaker, 2023. Further, as part of improvements to the national budgeting process, the zero-based budgeting approach has improved the costing of budgetary requirements for ministries, departments, and agencies. The revenue maximization and cost containment initiatives that are part of this approach continue to gain traction, Mr. Speaker, as some ministries, departments, and agencies are beginning to come up with realistic and informed estimation of their budgetary requirements, as well as streamlining their internal operational processes to contain costs and to improve efficiency in public spending. Government's net financial asset position. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to report that the Government Investment Account, or GIA, has shown some recovery over the past year, reaching 17,800,000,000 pula in October 2022, compared to 9,800,000,000 pula a year earlier. However, it is important to note that part of the GIA is accounted for by special funds and deposit accounts, which have designated uses or are held on behalf of third parties, and hence may not be automatically available for budgetary purposes. Low GIA levels limit the extent to which government can draw on its reserves to finance future budget deficits, leaving borrowing as the main financing option. Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding this recovery in the GIA, taking a long-term view of our fiscal position, it is evident that we need to address some worrying trends. Back in 2008, government's net financial assets, broadly speaking, equal to accumulated savings minus public debt, were equivalent to 40% of GDP. By 2021, after many years of budget deficits, net financial assets were equivalent to minus 20% of GDP, as the GIA was substantially drawn down and borrowing increased. At the very least, we would like to restore government's net financial assets to positive territory, with savings at least sufficient to balance our debt. Mr. Speaker, no effort will therefore be spared to return our fiscal balances to a favorable position. Debt sustainability. Mr. Speaker, historically, Botswana's debt levels have been relatively low, and debt servicing has never been a challenge. Government and government-guaranteed debt is expected to remain below 25% of GDP by the end of NDP 11 in March 2023, which is a sustainable level and well below the statutory limit of 40% of GDP. However, with limited room to draw down from the government savings, any further budget deficits will result in increased borrowing. This trend, coupled with rising interest rates, means that we must pay attention to our growing debt service obligations. We have carefully assessed the medium-term debt risk, distress, or burden, and our capacity to repay. And, Mr. Speaker, I am convinced that our envisaged fiscal strategy will restore fiscal sustainability before we are forced into a fiscal or debt crisis. Ideally, however, we should be running budget surpluses so as to rebuild our financial buffers to provide resilience in the event of shocks, as well as to minimize further debt accumulation. Budget transparency and participation. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Finance will continue to ensure an open and transparent budget process with the intention of making it inclusive, responsive, and impactful. The International Budget Partnership, in collaboration with Botswana Watch, conducted an open budget survey in 2021. The purpose of the survey was to assess availability of information and disclosure of government's budget decisions to the citizenry. The survey also assessed our budgeting process in terms of transparency, public participation, and budget oversight. The findings of the survey have indicated that Botswana obtained an open budget index score of 34% in 2021, which is 4 percentage points below the 2019 index of 38%. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, the Ministry has made efforts to improve budget transparency and budget participation during the 2022 budget preparation by engaging diverse stakeholders, such as students, people living with disabilities, and also the use of social media platforms. Further to this, the possibility of conducting the budget consultations outside Gaborone to encourage more participation of Botswana will be explored. The Ministry will continue to plan other ways to address transparency gaps through timely and more frequent publication of budget reports, as well as public education, before the next open budget survey in 2023. (2021-2022) budget outturn. Mr. Speaker, the 2021-2022 final budget outturn pointed to a small deficit of 127,890,000 pula, or 0.1% of GDP, which points to a more or less balanced budget when compared to a deficit of 16,400,000,000 pula, or 9.5% of GDP in the 2020-2021 financial year. The deficit is also lower than the 10,160,000,000 pula deficit that was projected in the revised budget estimates in February 2022, reflecting to a large extent higher than expected total revenue and grants from mineral revenue collections and revenues from the Bank of Botswana, as well as significant underspending on the development budget, Mr. Speaker. Total revenues and grants were 68,570,000,000 pula, compared to 63,400,000,000 pula in the revised budget, while total expenditure was 68,670,000,000 pula, compared to 63,570,000,000 pula in the revised budget. Development spending amounted to 11,860,000,000 pula, compared to 14,617,000,000 pula that was initially allocated. The 2022-2023 revised budget estimates. Mr. Speaker, for the financial year 2022-2023, total revenues and grants are projected to increase by 3,660,000,000 pula to 71,530,000,000 pula in the revised budget, while total expenditure and net lending amount to 76,410 million pula, resulting in a projected deficit of 4,880 million pula, or 2.13% of GDP. This compares with the original budget total revenues and grants of 67,870 million pula, and total expenditure of 74,840 million pula, which indicated a deficit of 6,980 million pula, or 3.05% of GDP. The higher than budgeted revenues largely show improved performance of mineral revenues. The deficit reflects the increase in salaries of public officers, as well as the cushioning measures aimed at relieving the population on the effects of rising commodity prices, as well as the need to use part of the revenue from the fuel levy to replenish the National Petroleum Fund, or NPF. The NPF had been depleted as fuel prices were held below cost recovery levels for some time, also as part of efforts to protect households from the full impact of rising global food prices. 2023-2024 budget proposals.
Order, please. Order. Asuna Kwadi Patala, let the Honorable Minister present. Order.
Starting with total revenues and grants estimates. Mr. Speaker, the projected total revenues and grants for the 2023-2024 financial year amount to 79,790 million pula. Of this amount, customs and excise receipts are the largest contributor at 24,930 million pula, or 31.2% of total revenues. Mineral revenue estimated at 23,340 million pula, or 29.3% of total revenues, accounts for the second largest contribution. Non-mineral income tax is the largest contributor and is estimated at 14,770 million pula, while VAT is projected at 13,300 million pula. The balance is accounted for by other sundry revenue items. Expenditure and net lending. Mr. Speaker, the total expenditure and net lending for the 2023-2024 financial year is projected at 87,380 million pula. Of this, 66,510 million pula is allocated to the recurrent expenditure, while 21,010 million pula is proposed for the development budget, as well as net lending of minus 141 million pula. Statutory expenditure. Mr. Speaker, statutory expenditure for the 2023-2024 financial year is estimated at 20,970 million pula, which is an increase of 53.3% compared to the 2022-2023 approved budget. The proposed statutory expenditure estimates will, among others, cater for public debt servicing obligations and government's pension contributions for civil servants to the Botswana Public Officers Pension Fund. The growth recorded in the public debt estimates is partly attributed to the increase in interest rates. A large part of the external debt portfolio charges variable interest rates, specifically the 6-month LIBOR, which has substantially increased from 0.65% in February 2022 to a high of 5.1% in November 2022. Furthermore, the increase in provision for public debt is also attributed to the impending maturity of bond BOS GB 0623, valued at 3,010 million pula in June 2023. Recurrent budget. Mr. Speaker, the recurrent budget is the principal vehicle for delivery of effective public services to the people. The 2023-2024 budget is also meant to facilitate the ongoing rationalization of ministerial portfolio responsibilities in alignment with the reset and reclaim agenda. The proposed allocations are aimed at refocusing existing policies, strategies, and programs following reorganization of ministries and departments. These allocations are further expected to contribute to improvements in education and training, the level of efficiency and effectiveness in delivery of social services, and provision of quality healthcare. Furthermore, the proposed funding will assist in sustaining livelihoods and boosting economic growth. With the establishment of the Ministry of Entrepreneurship, the proposed budget allocations will also facilitate wealth creation through creation of sustainable jobs with greater citizen participation and empowerment initiatives, attract local and international investors, as well as improve service delivery through ICT, amongst others. This is an effort to ensure that Botswana is on the right path to attain high income status by the year 2036. Mr. Speaker, the total proposed budget for ministerial recurrent expenditure is estimated at 60 billion and 300 million pula, which is an overall growth of 13% over the current year's approved budget. The growth is necessitated by the obligation to pay 5% adjustment of salaries and allowances of 3 billion 770 million pula to government employees, as well as payment of salary arrears arising from a Court of Appeal judgment on multiple graded C-band positions at 1 billion 410 million pula. The budget will also cater for an increase in the revenue support grant for councils and land boards at 407 million 460,000 pula, additional costs of upgrading sub-district councils and sub-land boards to fully fledged councils and land boards at 319 million 260,000 pula. Tertiary education financing at 263 million 540,000 pula, and an increase in student allowances and other items at 773 million 140,000 pula. Mr. Speaker, the largest share, amounting to 15 billion and 40 million pula, which is 24.9% of the proposed recurrent budget, is allocated to the newly restructured Ministry of Education and Skills Development. This amount is an increase of 3 billion and 20 million pula over the approved budget for the current financial year, amounting to 12 billion and 20 million pula. Consistent with national priorities, the substantial allocation under this ministry demonstrates government's commitment to strengthening human capital and skills development that is required in the quest to transform Botswana into a knowledge-based economy. The proposed budget mainly covers teachers' salaries and allowances, operational costs for state-owned enterprises in the education sector, tertiary students' allowances, food, and books for students. In addition, the increase is also proposed to cover invigilation costs under the Botswana Examinations Council, review of junior secondary school syllabi, as well as operationalization of Maun Center for Special Education, which has the capacity to absorb 100 learners with profound intellectual and multiple disabilities. Mr. Speaker, the second largest share of 17.1% of the proposed ministerial recurrent budget, amounting to 10 billion 310 million pula, is allocated to the Ministry of Health. The amount represents a growth of 3% over the current year's approved budget of 10 billion and 10 million pula. The recommended budget, Mr. Speaker, will enable the ministry to provide sustainable, preventative, curative, and rehabilitative health services to the nation. The proposed budgetary provision also caters for personal emoluments, drugs, medical specialist fees, utilities, and healthcare supplies. In addition, the provision also caters for government's ongoing response to the COVID-19 pandemic, including mitigation of the risks of new infections and the spread or resurgence of the disease in line with the objective of saving Botswana from COVID-19. The proposed funds will also cover procurement of drugs and operationalization of Seki Tumile Masire Teaching Hospital to full capacity. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Defense and Security is allocated the third largest share of the proposed ministerial recurrent budget, amounting to 9,840,000,000 pula, an increase of 15.4% over the current year's approved budget. The budget will address security issues that affect Botswana's sovereignty and territorial integrity. The major cost drivers include operational costs for Botswana Defence Force, Botswana Police Service, as well as the Botswana Prisons and Rehabilitation Services. The budget will also cover costs associated with operations by the Botswana contingent under the SADC mission in Mozambique, as well as replacement of vehicles. Mr. Speaker, the fourth largest share of the proposed ministerial recurrent budget, amounting to 8,220,000,000 pula, goes to the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development. The budget will support, among others, initiatives aimed at improving local governance and strengthening social and community-driven economic development. The proposed allocation represents a growth of 15% over the current year's approved budget. The major budgetary provision goes to revenue support grants to district and urban councils, which account for 50% of the ministry's proposed recurrent budget. The budget is also driven by the upgrading of some sub-districts to fully fledged councils in order to achieve administrative expediency and to enhance local authority service delivery to the citizens. Furthermore, the budget will also cater for payments to different social benefits and for procurement of food supplies for primary schools and health facilities, which will be procured from local farmers in line with the reset and reclaim agenda priority of value chain development. Mr. Speaker, in line with our priority to protect the most vulnerable groups of society and sustain livelihoods, government will increase old age pension allowance by 100 pula per month per beneficiary, while other social welfare allowances will be increased by 50 pula per month per beneficiary, effective April 2023. It is envisaged that in the medium to long term, this will contribute to the Vision 2036 pillar of human and social development. Mr. Speaker, the proposed budget allocation for the Ministry of Finance amounts to 2,560,000,000 pula to enable the ministry to drive its mandate of ensuring fiscal sustainability and support to financial sector reforms and development. The amount has grown by 7.1% over the current year's approved budget.
Order, please. Let's have silence, please. Silence, please. Honorable Minister.
The major cost driver of the budget is tertiary education tuition fees, which has increased to 1,510,000,000 pula from 1,440,000,000 pula in the current year's approved budget. The remaining 44% covers operational costs, grants, subventions, and transfers to parastatals and other organizations under the ministry, as well as provision for activities of the Eastern and Southern Africa Anti-Money Laundering Group. In addition, the proposed budget will cater for the setting up of the Public Procurement Tribunal to address appeals from bidders following enactment of the Public Procurement Act. Mr. Speaker, the proposed budget allocation for the Ministry for State President is 2,310,000,000 pula. This represents an increase of 46.2% from the current year's approved budget. The proposed budget will support the ministry's mandate of organizing and coordinating government business, as well as to safeguard and promote good governance, consistent with our reset and reclaim agenda's objective of aligning government's machinery to the presidential directive. For the 2023-2024 financial year, it will focus on, among others, reorganization of government portfolio responsibilities, which includes establishment of the National Planning Commission and creation of transformation offices across ministries, as well as signal distribution of both radio and television services. Mr. Speaker, the proposed budget allocation for the Ministry of Transport and Public Works for the 2023-2024 financial year amounts to 2,010 million pula. This represents an increase of 37.7% from the current year's approved budget. The increase is due to rationalization of government portfolio responsibilities in line with the reset and reclaim agenda of aligning government machinery to the presidential agenda, which increased the ministry's departments by incorporating transport and safety, roads and central transport organization. The budget will also support the ministry's mandate to develop policies, strategies, and standards on matters relating to transport, appropriate infrastructure, as well as maintenance in support of the Transitional National Development Plan priority of infrastructure development. Mr. Speaker, the proposed budget allocation for the Ministry of Agriculture amount to 1,450 million pula, which is an increase of 2.8% over the current year's budget. The budget is intended to support government's priority to exploit agricultural value chains, export development, and import substitution, as well as employment creation. The allocation also envisages improved domestic food production to achieve a higher degree of self-sufficiency in agricultural products. Mr. Speaker, it will also cover subventions to the National Agricultural Research and Development Institute, or NADI, as well as the establishment of the Meat Industry Regulatory Authority to provide the basis for appropriate regulation of the meat industry. It will also include costs of foot and mouth disease vaccinations and computer systems such as the Botswana Animal Information and Traceability System. Mr. Speaker, the proposed budget allocation for the Ministry of Lands and Water Affairs amounts to 1,080 million pula. This represents an increase of 18.7% over the current year's budget to enable the ministry to deliver on infrastructure development and spatial planning in line with the Transitional National Development Plan. The increase is intended to cover operational costs following completion, Mr. Speaker, of the Land Information System, as well as costs associated with land and water administration. Funds are also intended to cover personal emoluments following upgrading of sub-land boats to fully fledged land boats. Mr. Speaker, the remainder of the total ministerial recurrent budget allocation of 7,480 million pula, or 12.2%, will be shared among the remaining ministries and extra ministerial departments. I now move on to development budget. Mr. Speaker, the proposed development budget for the 2023-2024 financial year is 21,010 million pula, which is an increase of 27.88% over the 2022-2023 budget. Mr. Speaker, the largest share of the proposed development budget goes to Ministry of Lands and Water Affairs, amounting to 6,070 million pula, or 28.89%. The funds are for implementation of major water projects, including the North-South Carrier 2.2 project, which consists of a potable water pipeline from Palape through to Mamashia with associated waterworks to transfer water from the north to supply the densely populated southern part of the country. The budget will also finance, among others, the implementation of the ongoing Good Hope Phase 2.2 water supply scheme, Molepolole NSC Ramononyane water supply scheme, Maung water and sanitation, commencement of Molepolole water and sanitation, Kanyen network rehabilitation, and Boteti South Central water supply scheme. A small proportion of the budget will also be spent on completion of projects such as the North-South Carrier 2.3, Mamashia Habron water supply scheme, Lobatsa water master plan, Moshopa sanitation, Silibe Pikwe Sirule waterworks, and Kasani Kazungula waterworks. The proposed budget will also cater for land servicing projects at Khanzi, Palape Extension 10, Maun CBD, Mopani, Block 1, Kasane Plateau, Morwa, Pilani, Ntsinore, Boseja, Letlhakane, Sua Block 3, and Metsi Motlabi. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Transport and Public Works has been allocated the second largest share of the proposed development budget, amounting to 3,170 million pula, or 15.09%. The budget will cater for the following ongoing major projects: output and performance road-based contract of Mangkhodi Jwaneng and Rakuna Mabule, Mulamba Kwena Tsesebe, completion of upgrading of 3 grace intersections of the KT Motsete Drive at BTV, Rainbow and Game City Circles, as well as final payments for Gaborone Boatle Dual Road. Mr. Speaker, the proposed budget allocation will also cater for the construction of the following roads through either the conventional method or the development manager model. Mulamba Shashamo Keburolo Matangwani, Habane Mankodi, Mohodisan Habane Mankodi Boataloba, Palape Martins Drift, Nata Kasani Makalama Bedimo Topi, Nata Mau reconstruction, Francis Town Nata reconstruction, Maumu Hembo reconstruction, and Matite Bray Veda. Further, the construction of Rasesa, Tishia, and Palape Tonota roads will be undertaken through the Triple P model in place of the Francis Town Nata and Maumu Hembo roads. The
Order,
proposed budget
please. Order, please.
also covers projects namely Good Hope, Khorga Twane, Molepole Bypass, Midielin Soletau, and Mudipane Mabalani. Mr. Speaker, in addition, other projects to be undertaken will include airport maintenance and improvements of surveillance of Botswana airspace, as well as Martins Drift Bridge, optimization of the dry port in Walvis Bay, and development of inland dry ports. Further, bankable feasibility studies will be conducted for Mamabulale Palale and Mosese Kazungula Railway Alliance. Mr. Speaker, the third largest share of the proposed development budget at 2,340 million pula, or 11.12%, is for the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development for implementation of social protection programs, including the revamped Ipelecheng and remote area development. The monthly wages for the Ipelecheng program will be increased by 50 pula from 651 pula to 701 pula for supervisors, and from 567 pula to 617 pula for laborers. Other projects to be implemented, Mr. Speaker, are construction and maintenance of primary schools countrywide, upgrading and electrification of customary courts, and upgrading of internal roads to bitumen standard at Tlokweng, Mogoditsane, Molepolole, Kanye, Serowe, Maung, Palape, Ramotswa, Letlhakane, Mabutsane, and Madinar. Additionally, funding for constituency community projects will cater for the construction of internal roads using interlocking bricks. Mr. Speaker, the fourth largest share of the proposed development budget at 1,870 million pula, or 8.87%, is allocated to the Ministry of Defense and Security. The funds are primarily for provision of infrastructure, defense and communication equipment for the Botswana Defense Force, Botswana Police Service, and Botswana Prisons and Rehabilitation Service. Mr. Speaker, the fifth largest share of the proposed development budget goes to the Ministry of Minerals and Energy at 1,190 million pula, or 5.66%. The bulk of the funds amounting to 500 million pula goes to Botswana Power Corporation, with the view to cushion the losses emanating from the lack of cost-reflective electricity tariffs. Other projects include expansion of Francistown Fuel Depot, construction of a new fuel depot in Khanzi, cross-border power supply project for villages close to the borders with South Africa, Zambia, and Namibia, rural village electrification, and completion of network extension transmission backbone for Gaborone, Ramotswa, Tlokwe, and Muchudi. Provision of services for power supply build program, such as coal bed methane and thermal power station. Mr. Speaker, the sixth largest share of the proposed budget goes to the Ministry of Agriculture, amounting to 1,090 million, or 5.18%. The bulk of the budget will cater for the final phase of the Integrated Support Program for Arable Agriculture Development, or ISPAD, as well as the preparatory activities of the successor program, the Moletlotlo, which has been designed to promote national self-sufficiency in food production. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry for State President is allocated 1,010 million pula, or 4.8% of the budget. This provision will fund facilitation of the creative industry with the objective to broaden content to help monetize and optimize the content value chain, infrastructure development for radio and TV broadcasting, village connectivity to facilitate digital transformation across the economy, HIV/AIDS prevention activities, Office of the President facilitation and support, strengthening of DIS program, as well as refurbishment of Orapa House. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Communications, Knowledge and Technology is allocated 876,200,000 pula, or 4.17%. The budget will cover ongoing ICT infrastructure projects, such as GDN expansion, e-services, local access network, as well as the national ICT backbone. The budget will also cover ongoing research and innovation projects, such as the Innovation Fund, the Research and Development Fund, research capacity building, implementation of research, science and technology innovation projects, climate change research projects, natural resources and material research studies, ICT and electronics research studies, energy research studies, and building materials research studies. Mr. Speaker, the remaining ministries and departments share the balance of 3,390 million pula, or 16.15%. The main projects covered by this amount are Kasane Kazungula Redevelopment Project, which aims at optimizing the area as a prime tourism destination for the diversification of the economy and creation of jobs in the tourism sector, implementation of schools digitization initiatives in order to drive the transformation of Botswana into a knowledge-based economy, expansion and maintenance of education facilities to increase and improve instructional space, and upgrading of health posts and clinics at Maunatlala, Simitwe, Kgwatlenyenkanye, Zwenshambe, Mosetse, Kazungula, Modipane, Gantsi, Boatlaname, Kudumatse, Mogorosi, Makaba, Borolong Francistown, Lentswele Tau, Kopong, Ngojane, Takatokwane, Mabule, Mukubilo, Mogojogojo, Matangwane, and Bilikwe. It will also cover construction of hospitals and staff houses at Letlakeng, Gumare, Totome, Kasane, Palape, Kanye, Silibe Pikwe, Tsabon, Tono, Tashoshon, Lerala, and the Community Health Center in Mogoditsane. The proposed budget will also go to the Wealth Creation Program for funding of business models, monitoring and capacity building for entrepreneurs and enterprises. Mr. Speaker, as honorable members are aware, the total cost of the public investment program in the Transitional National Development Plan is 64,070 million pula over 2 years, including 29,970 million pula in the first year of the plan, that is 2023-2024, which is substantially more than the development budget I have just presented here, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if it were feasible, including all of the Transitional National Development Plan projects in the budget, would require an additional 8,960 million pula of borrowing in the coming financial year. Such a sharp increase would require government to pay higher interest rates on its borrowing, further threatening fiscal and debt sustainability. In addition, while we have provided for all the projects
May we have order, please?
Mr. Speaker, in addition, while we have provided for all the projects in the TNDP, we could not, however, provide for the quantum stated in the public investment program. Mr. Speaker, we need to be conscious of project readiness and only include projects in the budget only when they are ready for implementation. Projects will continue to be screened and assessed on an annual basis in order to determine their readiness for funding. Furthermore, it is expected that the private sector will be willing to take up the funding gap of bankable projects in the public investment program. Overall balance and financing. Mr. Speaker, the total revenue and grants for the financial year 2023-2024 are estimated at 79,790 million pool, compared to total expenditure and net lending of 87,380 million pool. This, Mr. Speaker, results in a budget deficit of 7,590 million pool, or 3.06% of GDP. It is estimated that this budget deficit will be financed through a combination of financing options. The issuance of domestic government securities in the form of bonds and treasury bills is anticipated to provide 3 billion pool. Net external financing from official multilateral and bilateral lenders is projected at 2,700 million pool. As a result, a total of 2,200 million pool is expected to be drawn from the government investment account.
Honorable Ratile, kya khollele ka hone ano.
Mr. Speaker, I move on to summary and conclusions. Mr. Speaker, the 2023-2024 financial year represents the first year of the second Transitional National Development Plan, whose theme is towards a high-income economy, transformation now, prosperity tomorrow. This budget supports priorities identified in the Transitional National Development Plan and the ongoing reforms espoused in the Reset and Reclaim agenda, and will go a long way in contributing to the attainment of Vision 2036 goals. As I have already stated, Mr. Speaker, this budget aims to provide targeted economic stimulus within the framework of a fiscal policy based on long-term sustainability. Most importantly, we will maintain our focus on achieving a medium-term GDP growth rate of 5.7%, which is required to achieve high-income status by 2036. Mr. Speaker, while we have a positive economic outlook for the coming year, there are heightened global risks that could have a negative macroeconomic and fiscal impact on our economy. It is therefore critical that we continue to build resilience and maintain the capacity to cushion the economy against potential shocks. In this regard, government will continue to actively monitor global and domestic developments in order to respond timely and appropriately to changing economic conditions. Mr. Speaker, as I have already indicated, a large share of the budget will focus on investment in infrastructure. In this regard, ministries are reminded to ensure that projects are awarded to citizen-owned companies, as well as to reserve constituency community projects for contractors in the immediate locality, so as to distribute the impact of the fiscal stimulus throughout the country. Mr. Speaker, I wish to encourage all stakeholders to play their part in ensuring the successful implementation of this budget. May I remind all Botswana that our successful development journey to date has been based on the commitment and efforts of our people and communities across the breadth and width of this country. Going forward, I must emphasize the central role that our public service employees play in driving implementation and service delivery. We can all agree that improvements are needed in our approach to service delivery and our willingness to reset and embrace transformation. I therefore wish to urge all stakeholders, be they within or outside government, to put customers at the forefront of service delivery and meet or exceed their expectations. On this note, all ministries, departments, and agencies are further directed to efficiently utilize the 2023-2024 budget to ensure positive returns on public investment and prosperity for all. Mr. Speaker, I wish to extend my sincere appreciation to our development partners for their continued support and commitment to the development of our country. Their contributions play a significant role in accelerating the transformation agenda and will be important in the implementation of the Transitional National Development Plan. Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, I wish to once again reaffirm our commitment as the BDP-led government to macroeconomic and fiscal stability. The stable macroeconomic policies, good governance, adherence to the rule of law, and a conducive business environment will continue to position Botswana as a highly competitive economy and an investment destination of choice. With plenty of opportunities available in sectors such as tourism, agriculture, infrastructure, services, and manufacturing, we commit to uphold our attributes so as to promote integration into the global economy and be a leading trade and investment hub. This concludes my presentation. Mr. Speaker, I now move that the appropriation 2023-2024 bill, 2023, bill number 4 of 2023, be read a second time. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order, Raditsela. Order, members. Lou. Kya holele kahone ano. Honorable members. The question is that the appropriation 2023/2024 bill I pray for dead silence, please, on my right. Honorable Member, Honorable Assistant Minister responsible for local government. Honorable Member for Lerala Maunatala. Bata huto ke go shapa ko Maunatala gone anong ya. Honorable members, nyaga ke mokobi ke amkhaleme wana kwa na tlo go koba wena. Honorable members, the question is that appropriation 2023-2024 bill, 2023 bill number 4 of 2023 be read a second time. Order, not yet, Lou. Honorable members, the question is that appropriation 2023-2024 bill 2023 bill number 4 of 2023 be read a second time. As many as are of that opinion, say aye.
Aye.
I'm putting the question.
Procedure, Mr. Speaker.
Order.
Procedure.
Order, honorable members. Before we get to that, ago ikete wena mutu akwangami. Honorable members, standing in terms of standing order 86.2, the debate on the appropriation bill shall not commence until one clear day has elapsed, and thereafter not more than 10 days, further days, shall be allotted for the second reading of the bill. The debate on the second reading will then.
And of course, course, this brings us to the end of the presentation of the budget speech by the Minister of Finance, Peggy Sirame. And of course, it was quite a mouthful, and it spoke to very many agendas, very many development priorities, which government obviously would embark on in this next financial year. And of course, speaking to leveraging the national development plan, the transitional national development plan. And of course, there's so many aspects that the minister, spoke to that were very significant in as far as the priorities of the budget speech. I could mention just a few. She did mention the fact that there has been a significant increase in the development budget. Over 12 billion bula will be plowed into infrastructural projects. And of course, these are the likes of water, sanitation infrastructure and the like. And of course, the implementation of these infrastructural developments has been given the major share of the development budget. And of course, this is to enable sustainable development. Infrastructure is seen as an enabler of development and of course on a sustainable level. And of course, she also did mention the fact that the private sector, youth, women participation will also be prioritized, in this respect to, of course, bring about inclusive development where nobody's left behind. And of course, key populations and different people are given the opportunity to participate in this development space. There's so many other aspects of development that she also spoke to in her budget presentation. She spoke about the new wealth creation program, which of course is a new program that will help facilitate different sectors of development and of course bring about poverty eradication, bring about employment prospects for the nation of Botswana. And still part of the development budget, 85 million has been allocated towards this new wealth creation program. She also spoke about other developments, including the Youth Development Fund, which of course will be given money from the recurrent budget, over 104 million. She did mention that. The youth population constitute a great fraction of the population of Botswana. Botswana's 2.4 million plus population the youth population contributes a large fraction of that population. And of course, developing young people and ensuring that their participation in the development space is felt and makes a meaningful impact is part and parcel of what a government wants to drive, to ensure that young people drive the economy and young people participate well in this economy. So the YDF program is an integral aspect of facilitating that and of course enabling young people's participation within this development space. In terms of certain programs that obviously have been money plow in into respective programs such as the old age pension, disability grants and ipelecheng programs. There has been a significant increase as per this budget towards the old age pension and disability and ipelecheng programs. And the minister also mentioned she did backtrack on the various achievements of the National Development Plan 11. There are very many milestones that she wrote home about, including village connectivity. And of course, this is a major integral part of local and rural development to make sure that villages are connected. Internet connectivity is a major aspect of digitization to ensure that no one is left behind, and very many villages will be given the opportunity to have access to internet services to ensure that digitization drive and the transformation drive is well executed. She also spoke about the housing census. The housing census is also one major achievement. It was done, and of course,
on the historic occasion of the historic visit of the President of Switzerland, Alain Berset. But I have to get instructions very clear. No, it's fine. Yeah, no, and it's a small component of. Yeah, no, it's like we'll get a cue from him. Okay. Somebody's arriving. Okay. We are coming to you from Sasratakama International Airport on the historic occasion of the visit of the President of Switzerland, Mr. Alain Berset, who makes history by being the first Swiss president to visit the Republic of Botswana. Just to borrow from a 2018 quote by the President, Dr. Mokgweetsi Masisi, when he assumed presidency, articulating Botswana's international relations posture. I quote, he did say that he did in fact affirm that Botswana from Tsakama International Airport on the historic occasion of the state visit to Botswana of the first sitting president of Switzerland, President Alain Berset, who became president of Switzerland in 2023. He actually has just arrived. His plane has landed here at the Tsakama International Airport. President Dr. Masisi and Mema Masisi are already here to welcome President Berset and his spouse to Botswana on this historic occasion. Let me just sort of highlight Botswana's relations with Switzerland. They established diplomatic relations in 1967. Botswana has been friends with Switzerland since then. His Excellency President Dr. Mokgweetsi Masisi has traveled to Switzerland 3 times, particularly at the time he was attending the Davos meetings. You will know that Switzerland is renowned for that almost trade summit that brings together world leaders, thought leaders on the issues of economy and trade. But last year, on a historic visit to Switzerland, he did pay a working visit to that country, and this culminated in what we are seeing today. That is the historic precedent of the historic visit of the Swiss president Alain Berset. Basically, he has highlighted that this visit, or it has been noted that this visit is to raise contacts between two nations that have had relations for over 56 years. Like I did say, we are here at Tsakama International Airport. The Swiss Air Force has just landed. But just to talk about his trip here, one of the highlights he has noted, particularly in his tweet that has created a big hype around his state visit to this country, they will particularly focus on the issues of health, among others. Switzerland is big on pharmaceuticals, so that is an area where Botswana and Switzerland will cooperate on or are likely to focus on. In reference to Switzerland's foreign policy, it is known globally for its neutrality on global issues. It is currently not a member of the EU, although it enjoys many of the other benefits that come across that regional bloc. Switzerland joined the United Nations 20 years ago, and it currently is a member of the non-permanent seat of the UN Security Council, and President Berset is actually expected to chair that meeting in April in New York. He has highlighted that he will focus on protecting civilians in conflict areas. He is also here on a tour on Southern Africa to benchmark and to see what is happening in this area on this part of the world. He has also alluded to the fact that he will focus on sustainable peace and climate security. Climate is a big 21st century challenge that many countries are speaking to. Botswana as well has raised this issue on a global front. But just to go back, like I did say, President Masisi has visited Switzerland before. He has been to the Davos meeting 3 times, and last year historically paid a working visit to that country. To reference a little bit of background about Switzerland, it has a population of about 8.7 million people. Just like Botswana, it is a landlocked country. of about 8.7 million, just about half of the population of Botswana. It covers a square kilometer of about 40,000 square kilometers. Its major exports are pharmaceuticals. It is also big on watches and famously or sentimentally known for its production of chocolates. That's the historic Hague. You will notice that in many of the videos that we have shown on BTV in the last 2 days, this is the type of relationship that the two leaders have expressed in their meetings in the past occasions. They arrive here in Botswana for that historic occasion, the first head of state to visit this country in 56 years. You will notice that he's being accorded all the protocols befitting a state president. We are now currently also observing that special moment of a 21-gun salute that is accorded visiting heads of state of the stature. This historic visit is a culmination of what President Masisi described